Hey, we are a few minutes past. Let's kick it off. Let's start it. And hey, my name is Ursula. I think you all know me from the past already. I'm going to be one of your hosts today. I have Niklas with me. And Niklas, you will be sharing the session with me. We are going to talk about cost optimization. And this cost optimization topic, so one might ask, like, why are we talking about this in the context of the cloud practitioner? And the reason is it is kind of a fundamental piece to understand whatever you're building, what is the cost of that, what you're building. So let's say that you're working for you have a new role in the company, or you're working for a customer and you're suggesting to use something. You have to understand, does it hold a cost? Some things might be free. Or for example, if it holds a cost, is the cost like minimal, or are we talking about something that will take thousands and thousands of euros? So that's what we are talking about today. And some fundamentals of what tools you can use, what methodologies you can use. And we are going to do just a bit of prepping for the exam, what you would likely see during the exam. So you should be able to see my screen, so give me a shout out if for some reason you cannot. And so let's kick it off with just the fundamental piece, which is kind of the introduction piece. So what I'm going to start off with in this morning session is that what are the challenges that we are aiming to cover when we talk about cost and cost control? What are the things that customers often see when they try to control the cost and the costs related to the stack that they're running? And what is the approach of how do we support the customer in this exercise? We'll talk shortly about the 5 pillars of cost optimization. So there's kind of these fundamental legs that the whole thing is standing on in the organizational level. And what are the strategies that the customers can use to optimize, in some cases already beforehand. So basically meaning that before they even deploy anything, or let's say that they have already deployed something, how do they control and say, hey, we can cut cost in this place? So let's start with the first part of this exercise. So let's talk about the challenges and customer challenges. So how does AWS approach cost calculation, and how do you, for example, if you have a pressure to lower the cost, how can you do that? Or how do you understand what the money is being spent on? So things that we might see or hear at some point is that there might be questions of what is impacting my bill, what is this component in the bill? I thought I would be spending less. Let's say that could be a question. How do I reduce the cost? Let's say we have like development, quality assurance, like a testing environment. How do I lower that cost? Because that may not be the most critical one. I want to spend less money on that. And what options do I have to bring down the AWS cost if I have to? So what is the flexibility there? So typically you get like reactive statements. So what I would love to see, and what I would always love to teach also the groups, is that if you can do this proactively, that would be fantastic, because proactively understanding what the cost will be, what will be the highest cost, and how do you do the cost optimization while you're deploying something. So what are the challenges that could be related to cost? So kind of identify the areas that we can optimize, and then we will address those challenges of how do we do things either proactively or how do we tackle those reactive questions. So what is the approach and how do we see it on our side, on AWS's side, is that we aim to always reduce the cost, not get to a higher cost or a higher margin. So that might sometimes feel like, what do you mean? You're a company, you want to have a lot of revenue. No, for us, it is actually customer satisfaction to bring down the cost. And one of the reasons we can do so is that we have the magnitude to actually bring down the cost by actually leveraging a bigger stack and a global stack that we actually purchase a lot in one go and offer that stack to our customers with a lower price point. So we have a lot of price reductions. So you might see like a price reduction saying like we have 100 something, price reductions in the past. We probably now are hitting like 200 price reductions in the past. So you will see reductions, not aiming to raise the prices. So that is quite unique for us. So the scale is one of the reasons we can do this. Then again, we have a lot of tools. So we can use tools to optimize the stack. It has multiple facets. So it has facets of what are you spending money on? So understanding what the money is going for, like what are you using as components, infrastructure components, networking, different kinds of controls. So how do you explore that cost? How do you optimize that cost? And how do you know that you are actually needing those components, let's say 24/7? Could it be that some of the teams need the environment just for the working days? So let's say like the normal working days, 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. So those kinds of explorations can also be like organizational explorations of what are you aiming to do? Where are you aiming to save money on? So we can kind of split this in two ways. So we can split the exercise in ways of we have the cost management piece. So how do we gain the visibility of the costs that we have and keep them under control? So it won't be all of a sudden, I don't know what's happening. Why is this costing so much? And the second piece is the cost optimization. So understanding what you're using and also being able to cost optimize when you need to do so. So what is cost optimization as such? That is the ability to run systems to deliver the business value at the lowest possible price point. And the lowest possible price point, you remember we have talked about like serverless components, like the microservices components. When you trigger an action, which is a programmatic action, you're basically paying for that action to execute. So you're not paying for the whole stack to run 24/7 constantly all year round. You're paying for the execution. That can be a part of your cost optimization exercise. Then again, on the flip side, somebody might say, no, we need our environments to be reliably available constantly at the peak performance point. We need them to be accessible. You can also say, I want to reserve performance for my company's use because we might need it and it's business critical. That is also kind of the other flip side of the cost optimization exercise, that's absolutely a valid point. So you could actually do that way too. So one thing when you look at cost management and cost optimization is that what does good look like? So what is a good exercise when it comes to having a stack, running it, having it optimized, both cost optimized and performance optimized? So we could actually discuss about that a bit. So what does good look like? So if you add from the fact that you have a traditional way of looking at it, so going from paying for what you use, so thinking about, do you always need the peak performance to be available 24/7, to paying for what you need? So asking those questions, when do we need that execution environment to be available? What are we actually doing with that environment? So are we actually using it to trigger certain programmatic actions like microservices, or do we need to guarantee like more traditional relational database environment that is up most likely 24/7? And then again, what kind of performance are we expecting? Is it always the maximum, or could we actually go with the flow and optimize based on what we need? How do we grow over time? So how do we anticipate the fact that we might be growing as a business? So how do you do that optimization exercise? So there's actually a lot of facets that go into the fact that what does good look like in this picture? So that is pretty much also a business decision. So you might hear the business owner saying, yes, this is something that we can accept, for example, as a risk. This is something we cannot accept, for example, for availability of the resources. So if your business is dependent on having always the maximum performance available, that's fine. That's also a business decision. But let's say that you're doing something that is pretty much fault tolerant. So let's say that you're doing like computational stuff on your machines or your programmatic code serverless solutions that can manage, let's say, differing resources, you might have options where you say, yes, I can use resources that are like pooled resources. So I can use like the cheaper end of resources. I can flexibly manage my computational side and use a cheaper end of different resources. So that's a business decision. So majority of it is related to what it costs, what is the business need, what is the criticality. So I mentioned that there are pillars for the cost optimization exercise. So let's talk about those pillars quickly. So there's 5 pillars to the cost optimization exercise. And let's put them in a picture first. So let's look at it in this way. So if we approach the cost optimization exercise through those 5 pillars, there are things like, how do you right size your resources? How do you increase the fact that you would probably need to be a bit more flexible? So how do you implement something that is elasticity? So how do you increase your environment elasticity? This comes back more to the serverless side. So how do you make the environment so that certain actions are built as microservices and they have their own fault tolerant solutions? And you can actually pay for that programmatic code to trigger. How do you pick actually the right pricing for your company? Because the right pricing might be different based on if you're a startup, if you're a huge enterprise. Let's say that you're working for healthcare, the right pricing and right sizing might look different. And of course, how do you optimize your storage usage? Because in many contexts, when you have critical environments, let's say you have your healthcare environments, you have your banking environments, the optimizing storage piece can be quite different looking. So depending on what kind of speed you need, also how many users you're serving. If you're serving tens of users or if you're serving millions of users, your storage is completely different. So is the cost. So, so we are looking at different cost optimization pillars. And then last but not least, of course, we have the piece of, or the last pillar of, we need to have a tooling in place to understand the cost. So monitoring and improving is one of the pillars. So measuring, monitoring, and improving your cost, understanding how resilient, for example, your environment is. I will quickly cover the pillars piece by piece, and then that's basically just the introduction piece. And then we can actually stop there, have a bit of questions, and then I can hand over to Niklas to kind of look at the next piece that is actually more practical side of the cost optimization. But let's just look at the pillars a bit. So pillar 1, which is the right sizing, and this might pop up in your exam. So right sizing, what is the most cost-effective way of doing things? So how do you choose the cheapest instance that will meet the business requirements and performance needs? So looking at CPU, looking at memory, storage, network utilization, looking at the price point. How do you get rid of resources that are oversized? So let's say that you have already deployed something and you look at your cost and say, no, this is too much. I'm not even utilizing it. So you're underutilizing it. How do you downsize resources? And also, can you schedule resources to start and stop in different hours? So saying that we don't need the resource to be 24/7, could we start and stop resources, let's say beginning of the day, stopping them at the end of the day, and do they need to run also throughout the weekends? Because that will also impact your cost. So right sizing example could be like, let's say we are running something instance type that has a price point. We will look at the CPU and RAM and network and disk. And then we might actually realize that we are not using it in a best possible way. So we can actually right size it to a different type of instance type, which is cheaper. And that means that we can then review performance. Are we still hitting our business goals? Like, are we hitting the performance goals? And we are actually hitting quite nice savings. So switching from just like different instance type to another, in this context, you might save almost 90% of your cost. So that is one of the right sizing exercise examples. What about if we need to add the elasticity piece? So that's the pillar 2. So the traditional pillar 2 is that it involves being able to scale your workload to match the demand. Not just that we are going to hit the maximum peak performance always, but what about if our performance needs grow or they lower? Can we be elastic in ways of how do we handle that? So this is important because you have to be able to pay for just for what you use. So there's a lot of options for this exercise. So traditional approach has been, let's say we always build for peak load, but that can be extremely expensive. So then you end up having the overcapacity. So if you always optimize for peak load, you're paying for something that in most days you don't use. So how do we tackle that in AWS environments? So we can lower the cost with elasticity. So actually use something that is an auto scaling. Or of course, you can also look at it via the lens of microservices, but let's look at auto scaling. What auto scaling does, it allows you to react to those changes. So we need more power or less power. We can auto scale the resources. We can both scale them up, scale them down. So how do you schedule your workloads if you know the time schedule, or if you just follow what's being requested from the workload from the users, can you scale up and then gracefully scale down? So that reduces the over provisioning exercise. And that is a complementary service that we offer. If you have been looking at like things like well-architected framework, you will see elasticity there too. Then we have the third pillar, which is the leveraging the right pricing model. And that is part that you can see in your exam. And this is important because you might see very specific questions on this. So we have different pricing models. And one fundamental piece to start off with is that if you're just kicking off a new account, you're setting up your account, you want to have AWS console available, you want to kick off resources, and let's say you want to kick off resources, something that is not free tier, so it's not free to use, you want to use paid services, you will use something called on-demand pricing. So on-demand pricing is also kind of the flat line or the baseline of you can reserve instances, so you can pay for the instances, you can pay for different kinds of services, you can put in your credit card. But what about if you're a company and you know that I will be using the resources for the next years to come, let's say 3 years to come, I know that I will need those services. Then again, if you can dedicate that you want to use them for the 3 years, you can use different saving plans that will actually save you a lot of money. So that is one way of doing that, but there's also pricing models that allows you to reserve instances so that you know that you have the capacity available. And then again, we have something called spot instances that is kind of a pool of resources that can handle computational exercises. Let's say that you're doing science-based math and you want to push those calculations out to a farm of machines. You can use spot instances, but the trick is that spot instances are cheap to use, but we don't guarantee a certain amount of availability, or not necessarily always even a type of availability, but they are extremely cheap pool of resources to use. So you might balance out the fact that my stack can manage that different pool of resources, and I don't really care if I have 10 or 100 resources at the moment, but I want to get that price point that is lower. You might actually decide to use a farm of resources that allows you access to cheaper instance prices. So those are kind of the mechanisms. So let's look at what are the different ways of doing this. So reserved instances and saving plans is one way of doing this. So what are those? So those are basically discounts applied to instances based on your long-term commitment. So we are typically talking about a company that is committing to a use. So this assumes that you're using those resources for a certain number of days, weeks, months. So basically it's between typically 1 to 3 years. And what is the benefit of having those reserved instances or savings plans is that you can typically get a discount that can be up to 75% of the on-demand pricing. So that is actually a huge gain if you look at it that way. Probably you don't want to put your credit card down and say, I want to always pay for on-demand. The flip side, so think about the flip side. The exam might ask you or give you a scenario and say, yeah, you have the option of using reserved instances and savings plans, etc., etc. But the exam question might mention that you want to have the flexibility in any point in time to let go of the resources. The huge benefit of using on-demand is the fact that you can at any point say, I don't like this, I don't want to use this, I want to change even to another vendor, you can do so. If you're making commitments for a year, for 3 years, then you have made the commitment for that time period. Then you will gain the benefit of having that discount that can be 75%, but you have already committed to a certain number of spend. So that is kind of the key difference. So do you want to have the flexibility to switch at any point, or do you want to have a cheaper price point? So that is kind of in a nutshell, and we will talk about this a bit more later on. What are the different kinds of saving options that we have? You won't get very complicated questions on this throughout the exam, but when you read the question, look at it in ways of, is it talking about flexibility, or is it talking about commitment and guaranteeing that you have those resources? And also the question is, are you optimizing for cost, or are you optimizing for capacity? So those are kind of the different folds that you will see in the exam. I will quickly touch upon the spot instances. So spot instances are one way of doing cost optimization. You can actually save up to 90% from the on-demand pricing if you look at EC2 instances. You don't need to do upfront commitment or upfront costs. So you don't have to say, like, we are going to use this for 3 years. So what's the trick? Why is it so much cheaper? So you can use spot resources with various different stateless and fault tolerant or flexible applications. So you might have like a big data application, container application, workloads. So even web server farms, any kind of high performance calculation, computing services, you can use them for test and development workloads. But the thing that you have to think about is that the workload that you're going to put on spot instances has to be fault tolerant. So let's say you're doing a calculation. The way that you're doing the calculation has to be flexible if there are resources removed from the pool. So it should be able to continue confidently still and getting to your correct calculations with the varying workloads. So basically what will happen in the fleet of spot servers, there's only like a 2-minute warning that there will be machines removed from this kind of spot instance pools. And those will be terminated, they will go away. But if your workload is flexible enough, it doesn't really care. You just need the computing capacity. So if you have those kinds of workloads, this is an excellent way of doing it. So technically speaking, you would have things like auto-scaling groups. And that means that you would have different number of machines underneath that auto-scaling group. And the auto-scaling group is flexible based on how many machines you have available. So that is one tool to do the right pricing model. And those are things that you might see questions on. Then we had the pillar 4, which is the leveraging the right storage class, which means basically when we talk about like EBS, so elastic block storage, and simple storage service, so S3. So we have multiple different storage services. As you have seen, we have your EFS and similar for Windows sides. So why do you need to talk about this when you talk about cost optimization? So we offer different tiers of storage based on how often, like how frequently or infrequently you access your data. So it doesn't really, it doesn't make sense for you to pay the same price for data that you access every day opposed to something that you need once in 5 years. So you probably want to pay less if you just want to store the data and you very seldom need to read it. So you have options like cold storage and archival options that will have a lower price point. So they are in orders of magnitude cheaper than your standard on-demand pricing. So you should actually review your capacity demands and also the demand when you need to read that storage. So there's a huge difference if you're saying like, I need to get the millisecond latencies and always have access to my storage data, to the fact that, well, I need to store a huge number of data for 10 years, but I don't know if I ever need it. But I will have to store it because my business demand for legal purposes requires me to store it. So the requirement is completely different. So mechanisms for that side is, of course, also the different storage tiers. And how do you calculate it is based on the demand of the business. And last piece, which is the last pillar in this exercise before we stop and we can take questions, and then I will hand over for Niklas to talk about the next module, is the mechanisms for, so pillar 5, which is the mechanisms for cost optimization. So I will do just a quick summary of what are those mechanisms. So pillar 5. So mechanism for cost optimization is essentially the kind of the processes or the tools to complement all the other 4 pillars. So let's look at what we have. If we have 4 different options here, oh, come on. So one thing is that we could actually look at our resources and decide to tag them. So we could decide to tag our solutions with like tags like production, development, quality assurance, testing. So we know which environment it's serving. Or we can even do like geo. So we could do EMEA, we could do Asia Pacific. So we could have like geo environments. That cost allocation tags allows you to follow what is the cost for different groups of services, either based on the workload or the geo or the group inside your business, like human resources, development and such. The second is that you define metrics and set targets and review how those behave. So metrics of what's the expected allocation for CPUs or our average CPU usage. Set targets if we are kind of hitting the maximum range, like how do we want to scale up, and review also the numbers that we are seeing, both on performance side and cost side. And also, you need to enable your teams to architect for cost. So they need to understand what things will affect and impact your cost. And then you have to also assign optimization responsibility. As a business, this is a sign of mature business, that people understand what is impacting it, how it's optimized, and who is eventually responsible over either the full cost or, let's say, the geographic cost or business unit cost. So those things should be top of mind when you also build your new environments. So I would say these are the summary levels of the things that we will look at. And I will stop here for a moment and let's see if we have any questions. So what I'm thinking about is we will talk about the customer journey in cost optimization next, but any questions at the moment? Okay, no.
And you can always put questions in a chat. One of us will answer them there or pick those up over here. I actually think, Ursula, that we have a little bit of a challenge here. I'm not sure. Can I move your slides?
Yeah,
somehow?
so I can. Yeah, so let me.
Because we didn't have time in the beginning, so that I can't share anything. My Mac won't allow it.
Yeah, so you'll be able to do that. So your co-host.
I know, but my Mac won't allow it. So you will have to run the slides, and no I can do the talking.
Yes, no problem. Hang on, let me do that.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
I'll just poke you. You can just
always
take the next slides.
Yeah.
We'll try to go through this part a little bit faster. It doesn't really come up too much in the exam, but let's take the next slide. The customer journey into AWS normally goes through a few stages. in the beginning, the customers are looking into how to go into the cloud, like investigating that. Then after you have noticed that, all right, the cloud is the way we want to go, you start implementing and testing your solution, and during that time your costs will constantly go up, and after you get into production and operation, a little bit different things, different types of cost optimization strategies are what you can use. Let's take the next slide. So in the beginning, when you're first coming into cloud, what can you do? You can look at the best practices, and from there you review your account structure, you implement the tagging that Ursula was talking about, just to get visibility into those costs, and architect those costs in mind already in the beginning. Then next we go to the next slide, where you're starting to implement your environment. So what you should do is always monitor your costs, have budgets, make architectural decisions. What I like to say always, kind of when you're thinking about cloud, is that first of all, think about what you actually need. So only use those resources that you need. And the second thing is that pay as little as possible for those resources. And I mean, after you have put a lot of thought and effort into putting your workloads on the cloud, then comes the time that when you can start kind of looking back and reviewing what you can do. Next slide. So when you get into production, then you kind of start looking back. How can I save costs here? Review the usage, keep monitoring it, consider some automations, like you might have built your monolith to not have auto scaling, for example, and then you just review those. And once you get to the operational stage, next slide, yeah, I would kind of I would already probably be doing these during the earlier phases, but that's just because I work for a consultancy firm. I don't work for Amazon, so my perspective is a little bit from the client side, and looking at multiple clients. It's like always consider during your build time as well, if you know that you are going into the cloud and you will be using the cloud for the next 3 years, like the decision has been made that you're going to production, you're just ramping up, like in the middle of the line here, you should already start making some sort of reservations, like savings plans, or maybe even arise reserved instances, depending kind of what you know that is coming. Like if your project to get operational in AWS takes, let's say, a year or two, you're a big enterprise, you need to take a lot of things in there, you can already save during the 2 years that your migration to the cloud is taking. The next slide we can actually kind of slide over. I'm not going to talk about that. Doesn't really make too much sense to go through the same thing again. But then how to start on this journey. To look back at the data that you have, you can see in CloudWatch, for example, what kind of instances you have and how those are utilized. Is there some way of where you can see from there that which ones are like too big? Are you utilizing all the memory, the CPU capacity? If your instances are mostly idle, then there would probably be a case for right sizing, and how many of those can you kind of right size. So run with as little as possible. That's what I said in the beginning, kind of that only use what you need. Then how could you benefit from reserved instances and savings plans? I think today Amazon actually in console, they say that If you go to buy reserved instances, they will tell that, hey, buy a savings plan instead. Savings plans give you a little bit more flexibility, and reserved instances do give you the reservation, so you actually will have that instance no matter what. How many instances are you running 24/7? Most of our clients actually that I work with, their development environments don't need to be running except from 9 to 5 on weekdays while they're doing that. And there's automation built to shut down those instances during weekends and nighttime, because nobody is going to use them. So that's one really good way of optimizing costs. And of course, auto scaling, that will help you if your workloads are fluctuating, they're going up or down. And I do recommend taking a look at the cost optimization pillar white papers. It will give you a really nice view into how to think about cost optimization. It won't tell you what's right or wrong, but it will kind of give you check boxes that have you thought about this and that. So that's what is really the biggest value of well-architected, is to make you think yourself, like, are you doing all the cost optimization steps that you need to do? All right, then next we actually have a short quiz here. So this is for you to take a look a little bit and kind of select which ones would be right. So the customer has been using AWS to host a web application for several years. Now, which cost optimization pillar is likely to yield savings quickly? This could be a direct question out of the practitioner exam. And if we think about this a little bit, well, maybe even all, but let's take the next slide. The correct answer for this would be right sizing and decommissioning unused resources, or reserved instances and savings plans. Why? If you've been running for years, you already know how your workload is running. You have the necessary data to right size and throw away resources that you don't need. You also know that several years since you've been running, you will most likely be running for the next several years as well. So making a commitment to use the resources will give you quick results and savings. All right, then we have another question as well. So the customer is planning to migrate the workload from on-premises to AWS, and they're just starting on the journey and worried about costs. What would you advise them to use? Let's think about this for a moment. I actually think that they could probably do all of this. Let's take a look. Yes, that's actually all of them, because you can, while planning, you can really ensure that you have everything. And when you're starting from scratch, you can start architecting with Elasticity. You can already there choose the storage that you need and use them. So you can design for costs and take everything into account from the beginning. And this is what I would or I do for a lot of clients who are kind of migrating into the cloud. It's like, let's talk about costs from day one, instead of just migrating blindly. Costs is an important factor that needs to be considered, but you don't really need to go too deep into it. Just think about paying as little as possible and how you could achieve that goal for yourself or your clients. All right, I think that was the small part there. Next slide is like a thank you slide that we can just hop over. And then let's talk about a little bit about cost optimization.
So I think tools in total is kind of, and that's probably a thing we might see in the exam too.
Yeah, actually tools is a good thing. This the introduction didn't really ring a bell for me. Let's go to the next slide and start talking about the actual tools that we can use. So what kind of tools does AWS provide? Well, consolidated billing, what is that, and how does it benefit you? In AWS, you have heard before that there are these constructs of organizations. So having multiple AWS accounts, and then those are then combined into one single bill. So if you enable consolidated billing in an organization, all of your accounts in that organization will get a single bill. And how does this benefit from the cost perspective? Is that AWS gives you discounts based on how much resources you use. So the more you use, the more discount you will get. So if you have multiple accounts that are using a lot of AWS resources, you can then gain benefits from that. Cost allocation tags, we did talk a little bit, or Ursula started or already talked about this, so just examples on how to do. This is something that is best practice. So you should always tag your resources in some way. So for example, those environments or cost centers, like always consider that you should tag something or to your resources, and the tagging strategy that you come up with it's probably going to look exactly like what Google or ChatGPT tells you to use as a tagging strategy, because these just don't invent the wheel again, just use the ones that are kind of proposed. Cost Explorer, that is a tool in the console, in the billing console, that gives you visibility into how your AWS spend is divided, what services are you using, how much you're using, and you can dig into the previous months, kind of is your trend going up or down. You can drill into the smallest details of your bill and identify items that you could look into to reduce costs. AWS Budgets, that is a tool that monitors the costs for you. It will just basically send an alert if your spending is going above defined thresholds. So, for example, you're using your free tier account now to try and test and learn about AWS. You should set a AWS budget for yourself so that it will send you an email if you start accumulating costs. So if you're accidentally using some resources that are not within free tier and you just want to learn for free, then make an alert for yourself so that you see that if you're getting costs. All right, and if we take the next slide. So here are some of the tools that will give you visibility. The monthly invoice is in an enterprise, it's like a 100-page PDF that you don't really want to dig into. So you go into the billing console. If you want to look at some more data, you drill into the Cost Explorer. If you want to see even more fine-grained data. And then if we take the next slide, there's some third-party tools that can help out. I know that Cloud Health I've used myself, gives you a little bit better view than Cost Explorer, but it's basically the same tools, just combining different things, and they're using the Cost Explorer API to gather the data to an external source. This will not be in the exam, but it's good to know, and maybe you want to take the well-architected lab for costs, kind of using QuickSight. How would you visualize costs in QuickSight? It's a good exercise, and QuickSight is a service that might come up in the exam. Like, think of QuickSight whenever you are going to visualize some of your data. It's if there is a question, it's just going to be a question of what service would you use to visualize your data. And if that kind of question comes up, it's QuickSight. All right, then what has been the thought there in the next slide? Doesn't really open up. Anything you want to say about this, Ursula, or shall we just
No,
go
not
forward?
really. I think this one we can skip. So let's go to tools for right sizing.
Yeah. For right sizing the resources and how do you want, I briefly touched about CloudWatch. CloudWatch gives you metrics for all of your instances like CPU utilization, memory utilization. You can also build your custom metrics there. The Trusted Advisor will give you insights into what you're using, recommendations, compute optimizer and right sizing recommendations. In Cost Explorer are tools that will give you direct input. I will just tell you that this looks like it should be right sized. Then it's up to you as a user to know that why is your instance bigger, for example. Do you have some requirements that require those, or could you run them on a smaller one? TSO Logic, I think this is an old name actually. Isn't this renamed to some AWS migration tool?
I think it's named multiple times, so there might be some of them that are a bit old. Yeah.
So TSO Logic, whatever its name is these days, it's rebranded for AWS. This is a tool that AWS bought, or AWS bought a company that did a tool that for migration cases, it would map your resources. For the practitioner exam, this is not going to come up or anything along these lines. And some other tools that you may see. Then let's take the next slide. When we're talking about elasticity and automation, autoscaling will be one of your go-to tools for elasticity. Any questions on the exam about how can you tackle your growing and changing workloads when your workloads change during the day, going up and down? And so how would you architect to pay as little as possible? And you would say, okay, that would be an auto-scaling item. So select auto-scaling. AWS Instance Scheduler, that will enable you to shut down your instances in an automated manner automatically during times that you don't need them. The third-party tools, we're not going to dig into those. So let's take reserved instances and savings plans. We a little bit covered kind of all of these, I believe, already. Cost and usage reports. Okay, yeah, CUR. Cost and usage reports are also referred to as CUR, CUR. And that's basically always pointing to data that you can get from the billing console, which will be stored in S3. So you will get like hourly reports, or those reports will come as they go, and they're CSV files that will that contain really fine-grained data about what you're paying for. So, for example, if you're running an EC2 instance for 5 minutes or something, it will show on one line exactly that, okay, 5 minutes of this type of EC2 usage and all of that. And those reports you could use to build your own visualizations, basically using QuickSight or something else, whatever you would want to want to run. Then tools for EC2 Spot. So there's an EC2 Fleet that is a tool that kind of helps you manage your Spot instances, so you can have multiple types of Spot instances in your fleet, and it will automatically in the background find you resources that are available. So if one type of instance, for example, is not available, you can use other ones. Then next slide is about tagging. So I think we covered tagging pretty much already. So just keep tagging your resources for cost and usage, of course. You can use tags for automation. For example, like if you have your test or development environment tag on it, maybe you will trigger automatic shutdowns based on those tags. So you don't have to identify more than a tag of resource, tag a resource, and the tools will then see that, okay, this is something that we need to shut down for the weekend, for example. Control and compliance. Well, you might have some, let's say, PII data in your S3 buckets. If you tag that S3 bucket has PII data, you can also use that tag for access control. So you could deny access to certain people to that data, since it has personally identifiable information in it. That's one way of managing access, would be using tags. Then I also talked a little bit about the tagging strategy, like what kind of tags you should use. And there's one tool that helps you to tag resources. Let's take the next slide. So there's the AWS tag editor. That's actually a pretty useful tool if you don't have tags currently in your environments. For example, let's say that you have an organization which has like 5 accounts. So you have your development, production, Q&A, and testing accounts, and the organizational master. But you don't have any tags in any of the resources, and you know that, okay, for the consolidated billing and to see the distribution in the master or the management account, you will want to tag all of your dev resources, for example, with the development tag that is missing. So you go into the tag editor in that account, and you select all the resources, and you click to add a new tag there, and then you just click save, and that tool will then add tag to all of your resources in that account. It doesn't matter how many resources you have there. You could have 2,000 resources. So going one by one and tagging them yourself would take forever, but with the tag editor you can run them in one go. Some open source links, take a look at those if you're interested. Next one has a list of tools that we have pretty much covered for the most part. Okay, maybe the pricing calculator is something that we should take a little bit of a look at. So there is the pricing calculator. Was it calculator.aws or the other way around?
Yeah, calculator.aws.
Yeah, I always use Google to find it. I can't, but calculator.aws takes you to pricing calculator. So that's for calculating your costs even before you migrate or put any workloads on AWS. And that is for sure a service that might be mentioned in the exam. So it will, there will be a question of how can you estimate what your costs are on AWS before starting to use. So how can you make a business case out of moving the workloads to AWS? So you will go into the calculator and estimate with that what your costs will be in the future. Then the next slide, these are for you, basically for your, you jumped, yeah, okay. These are for kind of, you will get these slides. So there's links here that you can then click directly and go take a look. Trusted advisor here is one of the tools that might come up in the exam, just for you to review what kind of recommendations it says. I recommend you to go and take a look at that in the console in your own account. Some additional resources that you can take a look. The well-architected one is the one that I would recommend to read. The other ones will bring you more in-depth knowledge to cost management. And that would be it for that. Do you want to take the budgets, or shall
I can take the budgets, and also I might skip certain things in this one. So I think let's go through like the most that we can, and of course if you have any questions, like drop them in the chat, and depending on who's speaking, so one of us will take questions, or we can even stop for questions. So no worries. So hey, let's talk about the budgeting side. And so I'm not going to dive really deeply into budgeting because it will not be in the practitioner exam in a level of that you have to know it all. But what is the budget functionality? How do you use the console to keep track of your cost, your usage, understanding, like, for example, monthly cost? And how can you do notifications? Because probably you would like to have a notification if you're going way over budget. And like, question is, when could you go way over budget? Let's say that you're allocating something that is having a very, very high performance disk type. Let's say you're building your own database server solution, and you allocate something that you don't necessarily understand the cost for, and all of a sudden you see your kind of the number of like dollars or euros that is going up, and you're wondering what's happening. So then you would like to probably have a notification, not just see the bill at the end of the month. So budgets are configurable, and they can be customized based on the needs of the customer. So it can be that you're doing a consultancy work, so you have separate customers that you're working for. So you, of course, need to understand their needs. And so what we'll do, we'll go through like the basic functionalities. We don't too deeply dive into this one, but things that you might see in the exam. So first of all, what is an AWS budget, and how does it work, and what kinds of dimensions does it have? So for example, if you look at budgets, you can set alerts and look at the cost that you're spending on your infra, either across the organization or specific count. You can look at the forecasted amount. So forecasted meaning that you're expecting to see a certain number of euros going out. Forecasted, let's say you're looking at if you're going to exceed it, and the actual use, what's going to be used. So this is for planning how much you want to spend on service, and how much you want to spend on like one specific service. So you could do it that way too. Also, like reserved instances, utilization budgets. So defining like thresholds, alerts. Let's say your reserved instances that you have paid for falls under below a threshold. You would probably want to know that if you're underutilizing your resources, because you're paying for them anyway. So you've made a commitment to pay for those for a certain term. So how much of those already paid resources you're using? And also, like, what kinds of dimensions do you have to work with these budgets? So they are configurable. You have different filtering terms. So you have things like, what is the service? That's probably the most fundamental piece. What is the availability zone that you're running this in? What is the account linked to this service? And so allowing to kind of track on a monthly level. You can also track on quarterly level, or you can even look at the annual level of how that money is being spent. you might see, so sometimes we talk about the fact that how many budgets can I create? So this might even be an old number, but in the past, at least, you have been able to create like 20,000 different budgets. So probably it will be enough. So typically those are just limits set in the account that what's allowed. And typically those limits, if you would exceed them for some reason, can be raised. So what is interesting, you can also add subscribers to each budget. So meaning that you can do alerts and you can send emails out as notifications to those subscribers that subscribe to that budget. So meaning that if you have your financial officers, they want to see how much money is being spent on monthly basis, quarterly basis, annual basis, you can send that automatically to them. Also for alerts. So if you're going over budget, they could subscribe to, I want to know if we are going over budget. And you can do those different dimensions also in the alert. So meaning what is causing that is going over budget. One thing to keep in mind, and sometimes I see people who are just starting their career with cloud and budgets, is that people say like, yes, I have configured my budget. I have set up my, for example, I have set up my expectation, like forecasted spend. I don't need to do anything else. The budget itself is not actually putting restraints on the fact that can you go over or under. So on its own, it's not doing anything to stop that. It's notifying you. So that is important to keep in mind. So if you want to take action based on that you're going over budget, then you have to actually figure out what are those actions. Sometimes people ask why, like, couldn't I set up like a limit of we can't go over this and then all the resources are stopped? Fundamentally, that's not a good plan because you probably don't want your production environment to stop just because you're going over budget. But you can set up different mitigation methods with tools. Let's say you want to stop your resources. You can even terminate resources automatically, but you need to decide what those actions are. So you need to build the mechanisms of what those actions are. So basically, budgets are a tool to understand what you're spending and the timeline you're spending it on. So so you can plan your service usage. So you can see your usage to date, your current estimated charges. And remember, estimated charges doesn't mean that that will be the final bill. So for example, if we would look at my account, my billing is on-demand basis because I'm using an employee account. So I'm seeing my on-demand pricing. Let's say I'm adding more services, I'm terminating services, that might vary. The end of month bill might vary for my account. So depending on what you add or remove, it will vary. And it's updated multiple times a day. So it is a live service. And if you have an organization, so if you're working for an enterprise, you have a lot of different departments, you have geos, etc., you can create their own budgets per those business lines. So let's say that you have multiple accounts in your organization. You can actually create those different budgets, edit those different budgets based on that structure that you have internally. And yeah, alerts is specifically one of those things that I would say that is extremely beneficial, that you know that something's going on. So so if you look at cost budgets, that basically allows you to say how much you're anticipating to spend on a service. So you need to set up a name that you want to use for your budget. You can filter based on different kinds of dimensions. So based on accounts, regions, service, availability zones. So there's a lot of things that you can use. And then you can use those alerts to alerting or trigger certain, either sending an email, sending a notification, or even the fact that you want to trigger something, that something will happen. So you could also trigger something that is programmatic, that I would like to take an action because we are seeing that we are going over budget. This is also very beneficial for you if you're setting up your own account. So let's say you're a student, you want to study different things. Let's say you have a teeny tiny budget that you want to still use some money on your services, not just the free tier. you can set a small budget, let's say $10, €10 a month that you want to spend on your services. It will function for you regardless if you're spending $10 or 10 million. It is a functional service regardless. So you will see if you're going over budget also with smaller amounts. So here we have a budget. So we have a budget, it has a budget held, and you can see that there's forecasted versus budgeted that is going over. So it says that threshold is exceeded. So basically seeing that now probably we are on a site that we need to understand why we are going over. So what does the budget allow? So when you're configuring these things, so budget usage allows you to say how many hours, for example, you want to use for one or more services. So you can do different filter criteria, service types, running hours, and all of those impact your cost. And then again, you can see like in this example, I don't know how small it is on your screen, but let's say you have the usage type groups. Let's say it's EC2 instances, running hours. And then you have your budget scope. You could say all AWS services, so basically covering all and everything. Or then you can say, no, I want to filter specific AWS cost dimensions to budget against. So basically you can say very specific EC2 instances to budget against. So it's based on what you want to filter that budget on. And remember, you can create multiple budgets, so it doesn't have to be just that one. So alerts are important, and so you can also raise alerts on things that are maybe not so obvious. So not so obvious things might be you have those reserved instances that are underutilized. So you're going under budget. You might want to know that because that's money that you have already spent or committed on spending. So you can raise those alerts like on the reserved instances utilization and also coverage. So those are things to keep in mind. So it's not about just going over budget. So let's say you do those kinds of reservation budgets. So reservation or reserved instances utilization budgets allows you to define a utilization threshold and then receive alerts when you're tracking below that threshold. So basically spending money but not using the resources. So because the reserved instance is a commitment beforehand, underutilization can actually lead to the loss of those funds that you have planned to save. So you're kind of spending money on something that you're throwing money in the wind. So that's not something you want to do. So it might mean that you have resources underutilized for a long period of time. So then you can actually switch around things like inside the organization, if you have a big organization, and figure out how to utilize those that you have already committed to. So underutilization can, of course, in your organizational level, of course, like dissatisfaction of your savings plans are not being like implemented the correct way. And it can be due to just a lack of communication inside the organization. So, so those coverage reports are part of the budgets. So then you can make business decisions on how to use the money better. Then again, if you look at like the savings plans as such, so how much of your savings plans has been used or you have used. So how much of your usage that you're currently spending money on is being covered by a savings plan, and also like utilization threshold, utilization percentage. Do you want to have a notification? Let's say you want to stay above like 90% range of that savings plan. So you're utilizing 90% of your savings plans. You can set up that threshold of 90 and the budget notifies you when that overall savings plans budget utilization goes below that. So it says like, hey, you're underutilizing that savings plan that you made a commitment with. So coverage percentages can be different based on your need. And like mentioned, below or over. So overspending money or using resources that you have paid for by underutilizing them. So like budget savings plans, like coverage example. So if we create like a reservation coverage budget to monitor how we use our EC2 instances, in a given, let's say it's an instance family even, we have certain coverage, certain savings plan, and then we want to receive alerts when that reservation coverage falls below the threshold that you have defined. So it's kind of simple process of monitoring your kind of size and type of EC2 reservations. So in this example, I think we are using like M4 family. So we are saying like this is a M4 EC2 instance type. You would receive alerts when your reservation coverage in that family would fall below your alert threshold. And you can have those different budgets for different instance families if you want to make them in a kind of separate budgets that will have their own notifications, or even separate teams that will be notified. So what about then the budget maintenance? Like, how do you define them, and what's the things that you need to be mindful of? So you will have in the console, you will have a dashboard. So you can create new budgets, you can track your budgets, as in this picture, you can say like there's a few budgets defined, some of them are under, some of them are over. So we can see like the total budget is now exceeded, so it's in the red. So most likely if we have notifications like alerts defined, you will get alerts. And so we have the overview where somebody who has access to all of these can see what's going on. And then again, let's take an example of what the notification could be. So notification, like an email example of we have had a budget that goes over, and it's like what is the amount, what is the exceeded amount, and the person who has subscribed to that notification will get an email, and so they don't even have to log on to the console to see these. So, and then they can reach out to also the teams that need to make action in order to change things if we are going like way over budget. So helps us maintain the environment, and also helps us have transparency inside the organization, so you won't get the angry call by someone saying you have overspent all your budget, because they have had the possibility to also affect that, and they know like what kinds of numbers we are looking at. There are certain things that are related, and these questions I don't think you will ever see in a practitioner test. When you go to associate or pro, then that's a different case. But of course, everything is based on IAM, identity and access management. So there are certain permissions that can be given to billing and budgeting. So for example, view billing, modify billing, view budgets and modify budgets. So those are like typical things that you might see in the permission side. So if a user has a minimum rights, it might be that they can't do these things. So they can't view the billing, or they can't view the budget. So then you would have to give them access that you want to have them be able to operate through their own account. So so what are the things that you want to allow them to do? So let's say when you're setting up the access control and you're writing your permissions policies that you're attaching to any IAM identity, so your billing references, so how do you actually say, what do I want those individuals to, or groups to be able to do? You can also use like wildcard characters. So in certain policies, you can say like, I want them to have access to all the billing data or all the budgets, or specify which one. So you can also name them. So what are the budget actions that we can take? So for example, here if we look at the AWS budget dashboard, so configurable actions to responses to cost and usage in your account. So things like policies, service control policies, targeting certain instances. And remember, if you want to do an automation based on actions that happen throughout the budgeting. So let's say you have a budget, you know that you're exceeding it. You could even plan an action plan if it's targeted, let's say, to instances that we can easily save from, like development instances, quality assurance instances, testing instances, that if we know that in any case we can we can stop them, or even certain instances we can terminate, we could build a programmatic code that would do certain things, or using, like we talked about before, tools that allow us based on schedule to stop and start instances. So there's a lot that we can do, but keeping in mind, it doesn't automatically, when it notifies you that you're going over budget, do anything about it. It just tells you you are going over budget. Things to keep in mind won't be in the test, but you might see words in the budgeting side. You see a word which is forecasted. So forecasted meaning, when you see that word, think about money being spent by our best known forecast, so before they occur. Or let's say you see actual meaning after they've occurred. So that's already being spent. So there's also a way of sharing that data through the budget of, are you looking at a number that is probable, so is forecasted, or are you looking at a number that already has happened being actual? You won't get a question on that in the exam, but it's critical for you in a role when you're doing like a cloud architecting to understand what is the difference. Budget reporting side. So when you're in the billing console and you look at the budget reports, you are able to choose, let's say, create a budget report. And it creates it gives you a wizard. So it's actually a wizard that gives you the possibility to say the budgets that you want to include in that report. And you can basically configure it, and you can email that across. So that makes it easier to report to also business line owners of what are we spending money on. So let's say somebody asked, like, we know that we had like a huge growth numbers at the end of month. Let's say our website took off and we are selling like crazy, but we are also seeing a lot more cost on the AWS side of resources being kind of ramped up. It's easier to report on that when you can share like a very hands-on report saying this is what we are spending the money on. And then you can, of course, always do the cost optimization exercise. So you can do different aggregation levels, having different trends, views, etc. So like visualization, and then you can push them to relevant email owners, members in your organization, and you can do different dimensions like daily, weekly, monthly. So the benefit of this is basically that you can do this without having those business owners log on to the console, because your CEO or your CFO might not care about the console. You can actually give them the report and say, hey, this is what we are spending the money on. Yeah, so custom budgets, alerting based on cost, performance, and also understanding that it can be underutilization. So if you keep those in mind and you think about like what the budgeting reporting means. So typically for a big organization, some limits that are good to know is that you can leverage the emailing of the reports to even distribution list, as long as those kind of distribution lists allow external emails, because that's coming from an external source. You can create custom reporting, which is typically like 50 reports per standalone account, or like organizational master account, and those reports carry like a small fee of $0.01. So it's nothing, but basically carry certain price point, and then you can do the dimensions daily, weekly, monthly, and such. So that's kind of the fundamental of the budget reporting. And like I said, even if you're spending teeny tiny amount, it's a good idea to monitor it. So even test it with your own account. If you have your student account and if you're spending any money on it, test out the budgeting. So that will be interesting. Let me stop here for a moment because we have a bit more on the tagging side, but let's see if we have any questions.
Doesn't look like anyone's written any questions. I would have answered those here during the live. But let's dive a little bit deeper into tagging. I know we've kind of talked about this on a high level, which is what you really need to know. And I think that there's a few key points from the next slides that I'll tackle. So let's take the next slide, and from this what to take. So there's some proactive tagging governance that can be done. I think in the next slides we'll go a little bit deeper into these, but the organizational service control policies and tagging policies are something that is good to be aware of. You can enforce the use of tags in your organization. So if you're enforcing the use of tags, then developers who are launching instances into your or resources into your organization also need to follow those rules, or they will be denied of creating their resources. Let's take the next slide. And I know this tagging, it's the most hardest thing that you can actually see in AWS. It's like impossible. In reality, it's impossible. But it shouldn't be that hard. Just everybody always agrees that it should be done, but it just doesn't get done. So you will probably see 50 to 80% of tagged resources, and then some of the rest will actually not be tagged, but should be. So whenever you're creating any resources, just think about tagging and try to tag. Here are some rules around tags. What can they be? How many can there be? Too fine-grained to be in the practitioner exam. These are not going to be in the pro exam either. They're like too tiny details. Just remember that you need to tag. And every tag that starts with AWS : is something that is reserved for AWS use. It's good to know that the tags that you see on resources that start with AWS are something that AWS uses in the background for identifying their managed services. And you can use those tags if you want to as a cost allocation tag, for example, to see how much those things would cost. Next slide. Good thing to understand, what is the difference between resource tag and a cost allocation tag? Not really too much of a thing. Like you can tag resources with any tags, and then you can enable those tags to be cost allocation tags. And if you enable a cost allocation tag on the management account in the billing console, it will take about 24 hours for those to show up in the billing, so that you just be aware that it will take time. If someone wants you to make a cost allocation tag and give them the details, you're going to have to tell them that, yes, I can do this, but it will take about a day before you can deliver that data. Next slide. This is pretty much just showing from the console, like how would it look like the AWS generated tags that you don't need to generate yourself, but are there. Next slide gives us a view into what kind of tags you would expect to see on your resources and what kind of use cases. So there's technical tags, you would use those, put them in place yourself. Tags for automation, you might have some automation that turns off your instances a certain date or time, or opt-in, opt-out. That would be something like backups enabled, true or false. If it's true, your backup system could be that taking backups of that resource, but not others, some security related. And of course, for business, who owns the service, who's responsible for the costs, is there an end client, how are those, or do you have confidential data there? How do you need to approve those? The next slide we can skip over. Then what will happen if you're not enforcing tags? They're going to start looking like something like this. I mean, there will be typos, there will be lowercase and higher case. So when you're using tags, just make sure everybody is on the same page of how they need to be, and I would enforce the right writing. So write a tagging policy that requires the correct things to be put in place. Next one, there's some tools here that are mentioned. So the tags policies is something that I've been talking about. So you can, in your organization, you can set tags policies that will kind of require to have the certain tags before resources can be created. And if those are not present, the resources won't be created. So that's essentially forcing everyone to use tags. There could be AWS config rules that are looking into the resources. Are those tags there? And then you could use a dashboard as a competition, let's say, shaming those people who haven't tagged their resources. Service control policies you can also use those to enforce tagging requirements if you want to. The tag editor I talked a little bit about before. Next slide is just going to have an example of what a real enterprise customer's tagging might look like, or this is a real life example, so it has looked like that. And next slide, just lessons learned. I don't really have anything good to add here, so let's go forward. Talking about tag enforcement, I guess let's just go fast because we don't have too much time. We like have half an hour, and if I talk half an hour about tagging for the next about 20 slides, it's not gonna really bring you anything new. Maybe take 85, the service control slide. This is a good thing to kind of see at least once, like how would you do a service control policy? These will come up in at least on the associate level and pro level exams. I don't think the practitioner needs to know what this JSON does, but it's something that is good to kind of know how IAM JSONs look like. So what this JSON would do, it would deny anyone trying to run EC2 instances if there is no tag of a cost center on that, and it does need to have some value on it. So if someone tried to run an EC2 instance without a tag, they would get a deny, but with the cost center tag, they would get an allow. And in some future cases, you will be asked in the more advanced exams that what will happen with this policy, like kind of explain what will happen, and then you will choose one of the 4 options, like which one is correct. Then there's some slides which will kind of show you how to do a tagging policy. Yeah, I would say review those if you want. For the practitioner exam, those are not going to be required. So let's take a look at 102 and start forward from there. Cost reporting using tags. And next one. So how do you enable a cost allocation tag? You would go into the billing console, and there is a cost allocation tags. And to enable, you basically just click the inactive one, and then you select to enable it. So it's not going to help us. Take the next one. So in Cost Explorer, then after you have put those tags in, you can kind of take a look at with the environment. Right now we have an example here with the environment ID, either production or test is the ones that are selected, and some additional items on like EC2 running hours are actually what's being shown here as costs. So then after you have done the tags, you can easily see that our test environment is not costing that much, but the production environment is the one causing costs. So from that data, you would be able to identify what to do. Then next slide. Here would be an example of how it would look if you have some automation shutting down your test environment during the weekends. So you can see that we are saving 2 days of costs from the test environment because it's shut down over weekends. The third one doesn't really open anything. Tag inheritance. Well, that will not be something on the exam. So, but kind of good to know that tags are not always copied from one set to another. So like if you're copying snapshots, and it will lose tags if you don't tag the target snapshot with it. But that's actually, we actually don't have additional slides. I'm surprised. We were faster than before. There is an appendix after in the slide deck that you will get. So there's some additional resources, but talking about those doesn't really help. Thinking like, should we go through something? Do you think, Ursula, we should talk about something more? We have half an hour.
I'm actually looking at, because there's like in the appendix, we have things like right sizing, like how would you do in practice right sizing a lab? That's not really something that we need to dive deep in here. So so maybe kind of like a summary level, if you look at like things that we have gone through, and if you now get worried that, oh my God, they are going to ask everything in the exam, no, they won't. So it's not really about that you need to know all of this when you go to the exam. So the kind of the core concepts of understanding what is a budget and understanding that there are different ways of allocating costs. So the on-demand, reserved instances, saving plans, spot instances, those you can have any kind of combination of questions in the exam. Not that they will be like multiple, but there will be a few. So be mindful when you read those questions. So what is being asked? So if somebody says, do this in a cheapest way possible or most cost-effective way possible, then have a think about it. Is there any other data in the question? Like, for example, if somebody says, your workload can handle changes in the amount of servers, server pools, or whatever you have, you might have to think about, okay, spot instances. Those are typically used if you have workloads that can tolerate a changing number of resources underneath. So most likely that is the cheapest option. So always kind of keep in mind, like there are different savings and there are different workloads. So business need is different. But like I think other than that, like talking about tax and things, you won't see questions on those. So it like if they only will be like fundamental level, like what would be the reporting mechanism if you would use stacking, like why would you use stacking? So the organizational level or the different kinds of resources you might use tax for, but nothing complicated. So in ways, yeah, we were actually fast. So hey, thank you everybody. This session is, like you can see, it doesn't hold like an immersion day. There won't be anything that we will be running like a full day of labs for. This is just good for you to know. The next session will be on Monday. So like keep in mind, now we are approaching the exam. So the exam prep session is on Monday. And what that session will cover is fundamentally what kinds of questions you will see in each and every category that is in the practitioner test. You will also receive access to request your certification voucher code. If you can't join us on Monday, don't worry, it won't be an issue. You can take the recorded session. You will also get the links to those voucher codes. So there are a couple of things that we ask from you is that keep in mind, we are paying for your exam. So the exam fee is 100-ish euro. I think it's now like 110 or something. We are paying for that. So please keep in mind that please take the exam. And also we would like to ask you to report on how did it go, regardless if you got through or not. So that helps us a lot with planning these kinds of trainings. So, and then we have actually collected quite a lot of feedback for next autumn and the end of year. And we will be launching a series of associate level trainings that it will be the data engineer trainings. So you will see the training calendar being populated and we will share it once it's done. So that will go through the data engineering side. That will also focus on a bit more like on the machine learning side of things of how you can use and what kinds of data models are good for that. So those will happen. But like, remember, you don't have to be live next Monday there, but follow us and see that you get the video and see that you get the links. But hey, I think we are ready to wrap up. Yeah, there's a good question. Is there a deadline when the exam must be taken? Voucher code wise, the voucher code is available for 1 year. But I would encourage that if you have the option and you're now requesting the voucher code, think about it in ways like in the upcoming 2 months you would take the exam, because it's also very easy to kind of, well, I postpone it and then all of a sudden a year has gone by and then the exam voucher will go out. But I would say in 2 months, if you can take it, you don't have to take it immediately. You can take it in the test center, so you can go to the live test centers. I will talk about it a bit on Monday. Or you can take it from your home, but then you need to know what kinds of practical things you need to do in order to take it from your home. So you need to be able to have a space where you can preferably close the door so nobody's going in or out from that space. And also you have to have a clean desk you can show that you don't have any notes on your desk and things like that. So we'll do a bit of sparring on that too on Monday. Let's see. Is there any other question? Yeah, go ahead.
I would love to kind of give my view on when to take the exam and how to take it. I mean, you've all been part of all of these webinars, or at least most of them. Honestly, I don't know how many of you have been missing or being here, but the material that that we've gathered here, it's more than enough to get you past that exam. Like, don't be afraid to go and do it. You don't have to get everything right. You only have to get like 70% right. And I actually have really new experience with the exams. I just took them online from my home, made an empty desk and did some. And I wasn't even planning on doing any more examinations, but Ursula actually pushed me into it, and she was like, "Yeah, you should do all of these." And I was like, "Okay, I'll take that challenge." And I started doing it. I've been studying myself for these specialty exams, and they're really hard ones. But kind of I did those kind of not feeling really well about myself, and I managed to pass 3 out of 4 of the exams that I did. The last one I missed by 1 question, which I will retake in a week or 2. But it's like, even if it's like a voucher that you're getting for free now, if you manage to fail that, I don't promise that Ursula will give you another one, but she might have an extra. So don't be afraid to go into that exam. Just go and do it. I'm 100% sure you will ace it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good call out. I absolutely share that. I have the same thing that sometimes I go into an exam and I feel like, am I ready? But also like over preparing doesn't kind of give you more. So if you're over preparing for months and then you realize that, yeah, you can score 100%, but is that time well spent? So in ways, I would rather push you to please go do the exam. And if that would happen, that for some reason you fail, let's have a discussion then, because also the data points helps us. If you say, I failed my exam, it helps us plan a bit more, like what things we should have included. And also, like I said, we might have a extra exam voucher for you. So don't worry too much about it, even though I know that people tend to worry about taking exams. But hey, cool. I think we are at the end. Let us know if there are any questions. Hey, thank you, everybody. Thank you for being here. And hopefully we will see each other soon. So we will see each other on Monday and then we'll do a bit of prepping. Thank you.